There are just 106 days until Election Day, and of course, a lot of questions surrounding President Joe Biden's decision to end his presidential campaign. Here to continue our Commitment 2024 coverage, Eric Pletzer, a liberal arts professor of political science and sociology at Penn State University. Eric, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Danielle.
Yeah, so a big transformation in the past 24 hours. We know voter turnout is a topic that you actually have written about, and we're seeing record donations for Kamala Harris. What do Democrats and Republicans need to do now to harness this new energy to get people to come out and vote?
Yeah, so I think the mood in the Democratic Party had been pretty blasé, and um, Democrats now have a lot of energy. And I think they had a big concern with Biden that he would not energize the periodic voters to come out. And I think the Democrats are now very excited. There's a lot of grassroots energy, and it'll be a good question whether they can maintain that and translate that into groundwork and getting people to the polls on Election Day.
Yeah, so Eric, you also write about how young people generally do not show up to the polls during presidential elections. Can you talk about what's behind that and what should campaigns consider to motivate young voters?
Yeah, I don't know if it's motivation per se, but anytime you've never done something in the past, there's some effort. In the United States, you have to register to vote. You have to find out where your polling place is. A lot of young people don't feel they know the differences between the candidates that well and don't feel qualified to vote and need to be nudged along. And there are a lot of folks who say that if young people aren't that well informed, they shouldn't be involved at all. I think that's a mistake. I think if we took that same logic to other things with young people, we wouldn't let them play baseball until they understood the infield fly rule or play soccer until they understood the offsides rule. I think people learn by doing, and young people who vote for the first time usually come out thinking that they made an informed choice, one that reflects their values. And so getting people out, encouraging them to vote, even if they're not that confident, is what both parties will be trying to do to their base.
And yesterday, Kamala Harris made the rounds calling fellow Democrats, including Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. She also called delegates to boost her support, saying she wants to avoid a virtual roll call and instead urge the nomination process to happen in person at the Democratic National Convention. How could that benefit Harris and the Democratic Party?
Oh, I think that's a very wise move. I think there's a lot of suspicion out there that the process is somehow rigged. And that the elites are pulling the strings. And a virtual vote, I think, would add to those suspicions. So I think running an open convention according to the rules, perhaps other people will be nominated and stand for the presidency or the vice presidency. I think a transparent and open convention is going to rebound to the Democrats' favor.
Eric, so your research also focuses on gender identity and voting for female candidates. What partisan strategies will we see in the next couple of weeks when we're talking about policies that affect women and actually hearing about it from a woman?
Yeah, I think that there's two elements to this, and one is whether people apply stereotypes, that they might think that women are not as tough or not as qualified for certain areas like foreign policy. And I think that that's going to be a non-issue for Kamala Harris. She's served in the White House. She's been in the Situation Room, and her background is as a prosecutor. So I don't think any of the negative stereotypes that have sometimes impacted women are going to be in play. On the other hand, she does have some credibility talking to other women about issues like reproductive rights, and she's been very effective on the campaign trail with that message. And so I don't think gender is going to be a major factor. And I think she's well positioned to take advantage or not be at a disadvantage.
And last question, we'll hear from President Biden sometime this week. Now, for someone who has closely studied and looked at elections and political participation, what was your reaction when you heard he stepped aside?
It was both sadness, because I know how difficult that would have been for him and his family. But ultimately, I think he put his party and country ahead of his personal ambitions. And I think all Americans should be proud when any politician does that, regardless of their political party.
Professor Eric Pletzer, thank you so much for being here for your time.
It's my pleasure.